Kim Day was only 15 when the Vorthon ships came down from the sky like black thunderclouds. He was walking with his sister Kim Nara through the ruins of an old city on planet Kepler when the attack started. The blue-skinned aliens had been taking over worlds for many years, but Earth had signed peace papers with them, so humans thought they were safe. Day loved old buildings and broken statues because they told stories about people who lived long ago. He was touching the wall of a crumbled temple when the first explosions shook the ground. Nara grabbed his hand and they ran toward their small ship, but Vorthon's soldiers were already everywhere with their 4 arms and scary yellow eyes. The aliens moved fast, like hunting animals. Their leader was Commander Vex Thoran, who stood as tall as 2 men with purple marks on his face that showed he was important. He watched with cold eyes as his troops rounded up all the humans like sheep. Day saw families being torn apart. Children cried as soldiers dragged them away from their mothers and fathers. An old man named Park Sung tried to protect his little granddaughter, but a Vorthon hit him with an energy weapon and he fell down dead. The sight made Day so angry his hands shook. When a soldier grabbed Nara with his 4 arms, Day did not think about being scared. He picked up a sharp piece of metal from the ground and stabbed it into the alien's leg as hard as he could. The creature screamed in pain and hit Day so hard the boy flew through the air and crashed into a stone wall. Blood ran down his face, but his eyes still burned with hate. Commander Thoran walked over and stared down at the small human boy. His soldiers were supposed to be the strongest warriors in the galaxy, but this tiny human had made one of them cry out in pain. It was embarrassing for a race that believed they were better than everyone else. The commander decided to make an example of the boy. He would kill this human child in front of billions of people across the galaxy. His death would show everyone what happened when weak species tried to fight the mighty Vorthon Empire. Day was thrown into a dark prison ship with other captured humans. The journey to the Vorthon capital took 3 long weeks. Every day the guards beat him and gave him barely enough food to stay alive. They made him watch videos about how great the Vorthons were and how humans were nothing but animals. But Day never gave up. Every time a guard hit him, he stared back with eyes full of fire. The other prisoners began to look up to the boy who would not bow his head. A teacher named Lee Hana started telling stories about Earth to keep everyone strong. She talked about brave people who died fighting for freedom. The Vorthon guards did not understand human words well enough to stop her, but they noticed the prisoners were changing. Instead of looking at the floor in fear, the humans began to stand up straight. They looked their captors in the eye instead of cowering like beaten dogs. When they reached the capital world, Day was taken to a special prison. Commander Thoran visited him and explained what would happen. The execution would be shown live across the entire empire and many other worlds. It would prove that humans were weak and deserved to be slaves. Day listened without showing fear. 3 weeks of torture had changed him from a curious boy into something harder like steel. He thought about his parents back on Earth and his sister Nara, who might already be dead. He thought about all the innocent people the Vorthons had murdered. The night before his death, Day was given a last meal and allowed to send a message to his family. Instead of crying or begging for his life, he recorded something different. He looked straight into the camera and spoke with a clear, steady voice about what he had seen. He talked about children being stolen from their mothers. He talked about old people being killed for sport. He talked about the cruelty he had witnessed. But most important, he spoke about what humans really were. He said humans might look weak alone, but when their families were threatened, they became something else entirely. The message was supposed to go only to Earth, but a kind alien worker made sure it reached other worlds too. By the time Vorthon's sensors found out, Day's words had already spread across space like wildfire. As guards took him to the execution chamber the next morning, Day held his head high. Millions of beings would watch him die, but he had already done something important. He had shown them that humans would not become slaves quietly. His death would not end resistance but start something much bigger. The execution platform was built in the center of the Vorthon capital with cameras ready to broadcast to billions of viewers. Commander Thoran stood next to the energy weapon that would kill the human boy, ready to show the galaxies his empire's power. But Day was not afraid. He had spent his last night thinking about Earth with its green forests and blue oceans. He thought about his family's small farm where he had been happy before the war began. He was ready to die for something bigger than himself. The crowd of blue-skinned aliens gathered in the plaza, jeering and throwing things at the human boy. But Dai walked with his back straight and his head up. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Emperor Voth himself came to watch. The ruler of the empire was 12 feet tall, with skin almost black from age. His forearms ended in claws that could cut metal. He rarely showed himself in public, but wanted to see this demonstration of power personally. As the emperor began his speech about human weakness and Vorthon's strength, Day felt no fear. He felt only sadness for all the pain these creatures had caused across the galaxy. They called themselves superior, but all he saw was cruelty without purpose. The execution was about to begin, and with it something the Vorthons never expected. They thought killing one human boy would break humanity's spirit. Instead, it would awaken something terrible that had been sleeping in the dark between the stars. The Vorthon capital city was huge, with silver towers reaching up to the clouds and floating platforms everywhere. Millions of blue-skinned aliens filled the central plaza to watch the execution, while billions more watched on screens across their empire. They believed this moment would prove they were better than all other species in the galaxy. Kim Day was brought out in heavy chains, but he walked like a king going to his throne. The crowd screamed insults and threw garbage at him, but the boy did not even blink. He had spent his last night thinking about home and family and the life he would never have. Emperor Voth appeared on the platform wearing ceremonial armor that sparkled like stars. He was massive and ancient with claws that could tear through steel. His voice boomed across the plaza as he spoke about the weakness of humanity and other inferior races. The Emperor told the crowd this execution would start a new age where Vorthons would rule every world in space. No one would dare oppose them after seeing what happened to those who tried to resist their power. Day listened to the speech and felt no fear, only sadness for all the families these aliens had destroyed. He thought about the colony where he was, captured and children left without parents. The Vorthons claimed to be superior, but all he saw was monsters who enjoyed causing pain. When the Emperor finished talking, he gestured to Commander Thoran, who turned on the execution machine. It was an energy beam designed to slowly burn through the victim from feet to head, causing maximum pain while keeping them alive as long as possible. The Vorthons had built it specifically to terrorize other species into giving up. But when the beam touched Dace's feet and began burning through his flesh, something unexpected happened. The boy did not scream or beg for mercy. Instead, he began to speak in a voice that somehow carried across the entire plaza, despite the noise of the crowd. He spoke about Earth and the blue world where children played in fields of flowers. He talked about families gathering around tables full of food and people who died protecting strangers. His words painted a picture of a species that cared more about love than power. The beam moved up his legs, but Day kept talking. He spoke directly to the cameras, knowing humans across the galaxy were watching. He told them to remember who they really were. He said they had never conquered other worlds or made slaves of weaker people. Even though he was dying, he was proud to be human. As the energy reached his chest, Dai's voice grew weaker, but his message became stronger. He looked straight at Emperor Voth and said the Vorthons could kill his body, but they could never break the human spirit. He said somewhere in space other humans would see this moment and remember that freedom was worth any price. The Emperor got angry at the boy's defiance and ordered the beam made stronger. The weapon began consuming Day faster, but his eyes stayed, fixed on the cameras. With his last breath, he whispered words that would echo across the galaxy forever. "We are more than you think we are." The beam finished its work, and Kim Day was gone. The crowd cheered, but their celebration felt empty. Something about the human boy's death felt wrong even to the Vorthans. He had faced their ultimate weapon without fear, and his words carried a strange power that made some aliens uncomfortable. Emperor. Voth raised his forearms in victory, declaring this was the fate of all who opposed the Empire. But across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, other beings had watched the execution and felt something they had not experienced in years' hope. The human boy's courage had shown them their oppressors were not invincible. On Earth, Daya's parents, Lee, Min and Kim Soo, watched their son die on a public screen in their village. They held each other and cried, but their tears were mixed with pride. Their boy had shown the galaxy what humans were really made of. Around them, neighbors gathered in angry silence. News of the execution spread faster than the Vorthans expected. The boy's final words were translated into thousands of languages and shared on secret networks across occupied worlds. Resistance. Groups that had been hiding began to stir, inspired by the courage of a 15-year-old who had faced death without blinking. But the real response was already starting in the dark spaces between stars. Hidden fleets of human warships that had been waiting received new orders. The execution of Kim Day had given humanity something they needed more than weapons, a reason to stop hiding their true power. The Vorthon Empire had made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had killed a human child thinking it would make other humans afraid. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the void. Something that would make them regret they had ever heard the word human. In secret bases across space, alarms were ringing. Captains were opening sealed orders they had hoped never to use. Crews were powering up ships built with technology the Vorthans could not imagine. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be weak. The execution had lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Vorthon Empire had exactly 30 minutes left to exist. Admiral Park Jin received the coded signal, while his fleet hid in the shadow of a dead planet at the edge of Vorthon space. The message was simple, but carried the weight of tragedy. The boy is gone. Execute order. Sunrise. Jin closed his eyes and felt something cold settle in his heart. He had hoped it would never come to this, but the aliens had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. For 3 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment while pretending to be scattered and weak. The Vorthans saw humans as primitive, creatures who built slow ships and carried simple weapons. They had no idea that Earth's greatest minds had been working in hidden facilities developing technology that would make the Empire's weapons look like toys. Jin activated his command system and sent orders to 847 hidden fleets across the galaxy. Each ship had been waiting in dark space, powered down and invisible to alien sensors. Now they came alive like sleeping giants, their crews ready to show the universe what humans could do when they stopped pretending to be harmless. Captain Choi. Hua commanded a stealth destroyer that had been lurking near the Vorthon capital world. Her ship was built with experimental technology that bent light around its hull, making it completely invisible. She had watched Kim Day's execution on her screens, and now her crew was ready to begin the revenge. The first targets were communication, networks. Human ships appeared out of nowhere around relay stations and broadcasting centers. The aliens manning these facilities had only seconds to realize they were under attack before plasma beams turned their equipment into molten metal. On the capital world, Emperor Voth was still celebrating when the lights went out. Emergency power came back moments later, but the damage was done. The Empire's communication system had been cut in dozens of places at the same time, breaking contact between different sectors. Commander Thoron rushed to the Emperor's side as alarms blared throughout the city. Vorthan military leaders shouted conflicting reports about unknown ships attacking their defenses. None of them understood how enemies had gotten so close without being seen. The Emperor demanded answers, but his advisors had none to give. Their sensors showed empty space where attacks were coming from. It was like invisible ghosts were destroying their empire piece by piece. Some older Vorthans whispered about ancient legends of warrior spirits that came for those who killed innocents. But these were not spirits. They were humans using technology the Vorthans had never imagined possible. Dr. Nam Su had led the team that developed the invisibility systems, working in underground laboratories, while aliens believed humans were too primitive for advanced science. The second wave targeted military bases across the empire. Human warships, decloaked directly above planetary defense stations, their weapons already locked on target. The aliens tried to respond, but their ships were designed to fight enemies they could see coming from light years away. Lieutenant Colonel Yu Han commanded a strike force that appeared inside a Vorthan fortress on their second most important world. His soldiers wore armor that made them nearly invisible and carried weapons that cut through alien metal like paper. They moved through the base like shadows, destroying everything important before vanishing back into darkness. The Vorthans had built their empire on fear and overwhelming force, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Human tactics were completely different from anything they had seen. Instead of massive fleets attacking from expected directions, small groups of humans appeared everywhere, at once struck fast, and disappeared before counterattacks could be organized. General Moonhawk coordinated the assault on a Vorthan fleet. Base in the Rigel system. 60 invisible human ships surrounded 300 alien warships while they were docked for repairs. The Vorthans had no warning before focused energy beams began slicing their vessels apart like toys. Within 30 minutes of the first attack, the Empire had lost over half its military strength. Communication networks were in ruins. Bases were burning and fleets were scattered fragments floating in space. But the humans were just getting started. Emperor Voth realized his empire was under attack by an enemy far more dangerous than he had believed possible. The humans were not primitive at all. They had been hiding their true capabilities, waiting for the right moment to strike. The execution of the boy had been that moment. As reports poured in about mysterious attacks across Vorthan space, the Emperor began to understand how badly he had miscalculated. He had killed a human child thinking it would demonstrate power, but instead, it had awakened something terrible. The humans were not just fighting back, they were systematically destroying everything the Vorthans had built over centuries. Captain Quan Mira led her squadron against Vorthan research stations where they developed new weapons. Her ships appeared out of hyperspace directly inside the station's defensive perimeter's guns already firing. The aliens did not even have time to send distress signals before their facilities became drifting debris. Dr. Kim Min, the chief scientist, who had developed humanity's new weapons, watched the battle from Jin's flagship. She had spent years perfecting technology that could destroy the Vorthan Empire in minutes, but she took no joy in seeing it used. The aliens had forced this war by choosing cruelty over mercy. Other species across the galaxy watched in amazement. The humans were not just fighting back, they were demonstrating technology that seemed impossible. Ships that could become invisible weapons, that redirected enemy fire shields, that grew stronger under attack. The Catherian ambassador sent an emergency message to his homeworld. The humans have been hiding their true capabilities. They are not primitive at all. They may be the most advanced species in the galaxy. Similar messages went out from dozens of other alien diplomats who had underestimated humanity. The third phase of the assault was about to begin, targeting the heart of the Empire itself. Admiral Jin's main fleet was moving toward the capital world, ready to finish what Kim Dae's execution had started. The boy's sacrifice would not be forgotten, and his people would make sure the galaxy remembered what happened to those who hurt children. 43 minutes had passed since Dae's death. The Vorthan Empire had 4 minutes left to exist. Admiral Park Jin's flagship appeared above the Vorthan capital world like a metal mountain falling from space. The ship was 5 kilometers long and covered with weapons that could crack planets. Behind it, 300 more human warships decloaked. In perfect formation, their hulls glowing with energy shields that turned incoming fire into harmless light. Emperor Voth watched from his palace as the human fleet materialized overhead. For the first time in his 1,000-year life, he felt real fear. These were not the primitive vessels his scouts had reported seeing around human colonies. These were ships that looked like they could challenge gods themselves. Admiral Jin's voice came through on all frequencies, speaking perfect Vorthon. "I am Park Jin of the Earth Defense Force. 43 minutes ago, you executed a 15-year-old boy named Kim Dae for defending his sister. You broadcast his murder to the galaxy as entertainment. Now you will learn what happens when you threaten human children." Commander Thoran tried to rally the capital's defenses, but most of the planetary defense network had already been destroyed by invisible human strike teams. The few remaining weapon platforms opened fire on the human fleet, but their energy beams simply bounced off shields that seemed to absorb and redirect attacks. Jin had no intention of making this last long. He had watched Dai's execution along with the rest of humanity, and the boy's courage had filled him with both pride and terrible rage. The Vorthons would pay for their cruelty, but first they needed to understand exactly what they had awakened. The human ships began bombardment with surgical precision. Instead of destroying the capital city, they targeted specific buildings, government centers, military headquarters, and homes of high-ranking officials. Each strike was perfectly calculated to cause maximum fear while avoiding civilian casualties. Captain Li Bo commanded the assault on the Imperial Palace. Her ship's weapons could have vaporized the entire structure in seconds, but instead she used precise beams to carve away the building's defenses layer by layer. She wanted Emperor Voth to feel helpless as his fortress crumbled around him. The Vorthon military tried to fight back, but their remaining ships were no match for human technology. Every time they fired at the human fleet, their weapons were absorbed or deflected. When they tried to ram the human vessels, they bounced off energy shields, like insects hitting glass. Dr. Kim Min watched the battle from the bridge of Jin's flagship. She had spent years developing technology that could destroy the Empire in minutes, but took no joy in seeing it used. The aliens had forced this war by choosing murder over mercy. As the bombardment continued, other alien species across the galaxy watched in shock. The humans were not just fighting back, they were demonstrating capabilities that seemed impossible. Technology that made their own weapons look primitive. The Catherian ambassador to the Vorthan court sent another emergency message to his home world. "The human fleet is unlike anything we have seen. Their weapons appear to use unknown physics. Their shields seem to violate conservation of energy. We may have underestimated them by centuries." Emperor Voth tried to escape in his personal pod, but human fighters were waiting. The small craft surrounded his escape vehicle without firing shepherding. It backed to the surface like wolves herding prey. There would be no escape for the Emperor who had ordered a child's execution. Colonel Zhang Ha led human soldiers into the palace to capture Vorthon leadership. They moved through corridors like shadows, their advanced armor making them nearly invulnerable to alien weapons. When guards tried to stop them, they were simply stunned and left unconscious. The Emperor was brought to the same plaza where Dae had been executed less than an hour before. The energy weapon that had killed the human boy was still there, its metal, still warm from use. Jin stood beside it, his face calm but his eyes filled with cold fury. "You wanted to show the galaxy your power," Jin said to the captured Emperor. "Instead, you showed us your cruelty. Now we will demonstrate the difference between justice and murder." But instead of turning on the execution device, Jin destroyed it with a single shot from his sidearm. The Admiral addressed the galaxy, through the same communication networks the Vorthons had used to broadcast Dea's death. His message was simple. The Vorthon Empire is finished. Any species that harms human civilians will face the same fate. We tried to live in peace, but you forced us to show you what we are really capable of. Across former Vorthon space, human fleets were completing their mission. Military bases lay in ruins, government centers were destroyed, and alien leadership was either dead or captured. In less than an hour, humanity had dismantled an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. But the humans did not stop there. They began broadcasting evidence of Vorthon war crimes to every world in known space. Images of enslaved populations, destroyed civilizations, and murdered children filled screens across the galaxy. The universe saw the true face of the species that had claimed to bring order to chaos. Emperor Voth knelt in the plaza where he had watched a human boy die with dignity. Now he was the one facing judgment. But unlike Day, he begged and pleaded for mercy. The contrast was not lost on billions of beings watching across space. "You will not die today," Jin told the Emperor. "Death would be too quick for someone who has caused so much suffering. Instead, you will live to see everything you built turn to dust. You will watch as we free every world you enslaved and heal every wound you caused." The Vorthon Empire was dead. 47 minutes after Kim Day's execution, their 1,000-year reign of terror was over. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Park Jin looked down at the cowering emperor and felt only disgust. This creature had ruled through fear and cruelty for centuries, but when faced with real consequences, he became a whimpering coward. Jin thought about Kim Day, who had faced death with more courage at 15 than this ancient tyrant showed now. Across the former empire, human rescue fleets were already at work. Captain Song Yu led medical ships to planets where aliens had kept slave populations. Her team included doctors, engineers, and aid workers who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler 438b, Song found thousands of beings from dozens of different species working in conditions that would have killed most humans within days. The Vorthons had kept them alive with drugs and medical treatments not out of mercy, but to get maximum work from them. Dr. Kang Da worked alongside alien doctors to treat the freed slaves. Many prisoners were so broken by years of abuse they could not believe they were really being rescued. They had seen too many false hopes crushed by Vorthon cruelty to trust their liberators easily, but the humans were patient. They brought food, medicine, and most importantly proof that the Vorthon Empire was truly gone. When former slaves saw footage of alien military bases in ruins and their oppressors in chains, many began to weep with relief they thought they would never feel again. Lieutenant Commander Shin Ra discovered something even worse on the prison. World of Wolf 359C. The Vorthons had been conducting medical experiments on captured beings trying to find ways to make their slave species more productive. The research facility was a nightmare of torture chambers disguised as laboratories. Ra's team found Dr. Yoon Ki, a human scientist who had been captured 3 years earlier during a Vorthon raid. The man was barely alive, his body scarred by countless procedures, but his mind was still intact. When he saw human soldiers in his cell doorway, he thought he was hallucinating. "We are here to take you home," Ra told him gently. "The war is over. We won." Ki broke down sobbing as human medics carried him to safety. Behind him, hundreds of other prisoners were freed from cells they thought would be their graves. The liberation of slave worlds revealed the true extent of Vorthon cruelty to the galaxy. Species that had been thought extinct were found alive in labor camps. Ancient civilizations that had supposedly died of natural disasters were discovered working in mining operations, their cultures slowly being erased by years of oppression. Admiral Jin established temporary governments on each freed world, but made it clear humans had no intention of replacing the Vorthon Empire with one of their own. "We came to free you, not to rule you," he announced. "Every species has the right to determine its own destiny." The Zeltharian people of Proxima 7 had been reduced to a few thousand survivors when Vorthons conquered their world. Now they emerged from hidden bunkers to find human ships distributing supplies and offering medical aid. Their leader, an elderly female named Zara, approached Captain Bay's son with tears in her eyes. "Why do you help us?" she asked. "Your kind owes us nothing." Bay thought about Kim Day's final words about the boy who had died, believing humans were better than their enemies. "Because it is the right thing to do," she answered simply. The humans did not just free slaves. They began the massive task of rebuilding entire civilizations. Engineering ships arrived with equipment to restore damaged ecosystems, while construction crews worked to rebuild cities that had been bombed into rubble decades earlier. Colonel Lim Ho coordinated efforts to reunite separated families across the former empire. The Vorthons had deliberately broken up family groups to prevent organized resistance scattering children across different worlds from their parents. Using captured records and genetic databases, Host Team began the complex work of bringing loved ones back together. On Earth, families of human prisoners began receiving news that their missing relatives had been found alive. Park Sue had lost her son 2 years earlier during a Vorthan raid on a research station. Now she watched through tears as he walked off a rescue ship, thin and scarred, but alive. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated a completely different approach to victory than anyone had ever seen. Most conquerors took what they wanted from defeated enemies, but humans seemed more interested in healing than taking revenge. Other advanced species began offering to help with reconstruction efforts. The Andromedan Council sent supply ships filled with medical equipment. The silicon-based beings of the Vega system contributed rare metals needed for rebuilding. Even former enemies of humanity stepped forward to assist. But humans never forgot what had started this war. On every liberated world, they built monuments to Kim Day and other innocent beings who had died under Vorthon rule. The boy's final words were carved in stone in hundreds of languages. "We are more than you think we are." As the 47th minute since Dias' execution passed, the last Vorthan military installation surrendered to human forces. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was officially extinct, replaced by something the universe had never seen before, a coalition of free worlds working together as equals. The boy who had died with such courage had given birth to something beautiful. His sacrifice had not just ended tyranny, it had started a new age of cooperation and hope that would spread across the stars for generations to come. 5 years after the fall of the Vorthon Empire, the galaxy had become a completely different place. Where once there had been fear and oppression, now there was cooperation and hope. The human-led Galactic Liberation Alliance had grown to include over 3,000 worlds, all working together to build a better future. Admiral Park Jin, now retired from active military service, stood in the memorial garden on New Sol Colony, looking at a statue of Kim Day. The bronze figure showed the boy, as he had been in life, young, brave, and unbroken by the cruelty of his enemies. Fresh flowers lay at the base of the monument, left by visitors from dozens of different species. The boy's sister, Kim Nara, had survived the Vorthon attack and grown up to become a diplomat specializing in relations between different species. She worked to ensure the mistakes of the past would never be repeated, helping to write laws that protected civilians during conflicts and guaranteed basic rights for all thinking beings. Jin often wondered what Dai would think of the galaxy he had helped create through his sacrifice. The boy had died believing humans were capable of being better than their enemies, and in many ways his faith had been proven correct. Humanity had chosen to rebuild rather than revenge, to heal rather than harm. The former Vorthon capital world had been transformed into headquarters of the Galactic Council, where representatives from every member species worked together to solve problems and prevent conflicts. The plaza where Day had been executed was now a peaceful garden, where children of many different species played together under artificial sunlight. Emperor Voth had indeed lived to see everything he built turn to dust, just as Jin had promised. The ancient tyrant spent his days in a comfortable but secure facility on Earth, forced to watch daily reports about prosperity and peace spreading across his former empire. Some called it cruel, but most beings agreed it was more merciful than the fate he had given his victims. Dr. Nam Su, the scientist who had developed humanity's advanced weapons, had turned her genius toward peaceful purposes. Her research teams worked on projects like terraforming dead worlds and developing cures for diseases that had plagued various species for thousands of years. The technology that had destroyed an empire was now being used to build new ones. The liberation of slave worlds had revealed amazing discoveries about lost civilizations and forgotten knowledge. The Arcanian people thought extinct for 2 centuries had been found working in deep mines on the edge of space. Their mathematical theories revolutionized faster than light travel, making exploration and trade easier for everyone. Captain Choi, Hua, whose invisible destroyer had struck the first blow against Vorthon communication networks, now commanded exploration vessels that searched for lost colonies and hidden populations. Her ships had found dozens of worlds where refugees from various conflicts had been hiding, bringing them back into contact with the Galactic community. The most surprising development was how quickly former enemies became allies. Many species that had served the Vorthon Empire out of fear rather than choice proved eager to join the Liberation Alliance. They brought their own unique skills and knowledge, making the coalition stronger and more diverse. On Earth, Kim Dae's parents had become symbols of hope for families across the galaxy. Li Min started a foundation that helped reunite separated families and provided support for children who had been orphaned by war. Kim Soo used his farming knowledge to teach sustainable agriculture on worlds that had been strip-mined by Vorthons. Fetch, Boy's final message recorded before his execution was studied in schools across the galaxy. Children learned about the power of moral courage and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when facing impossible odds. Day had become more than a martyr. He was a teacher whose lessons reached across species and cultures. General Moonhawk led efforts to hunt down remaining Vorthon war criminals who had escaped during the Empire's collapse. These missions were dangerous and difficult, but they sent a clear message that there would be no safe haven for those who committed crimes against innocent beings. The galaxy's economy had also been transformed. Instead of the extraction-based system Vorthans had used, which stripped resources from conquered worlds to feed the Imperial core, the Alliance promoted trade and cooperation. Worlds specialized in what they did best while sharing their prosperity with others. New technologies were being developed through cooperation between different species. The crystal-based computers of Altarians worked perfectly with human quantum processors. Vegan biotechnology combined with Terran engineering to create medical devices that could heal injuries once thought permanent. Perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned that strength did not come from conquest, but from cooperation. The Vorthan Empire had been powerful, but it was built on fear and hatred. The alliance was even stronger because it was built on trust and mutual respect. Kim Dae had been dead for 5 years, but his influence grew stronger every day. Statues of the brave boy stood on thousands of worlds, reminding everyone that one person willing to stand up for what was right could change the entire universe. The galaxy was finally at peace, not because one species had conquered all others, but because all species had chosen to work together. It was the future that a 15-year-old human boy had dreamed of as he faced death with courage that inspired the stars themselves.